Hello and welcome to Manny Beal. Following my recent four-part series on my presentation of my major criticisms of Bernardo Kastrup's ontology / metaphysics, a new video arrived from Monistic Idealism, which is a channel on YouTube with 2,380 subs. Just about 9 times more than I have, right? Something like that, okay. We all have to do it our way, fight our own battles, right? Okay. This one is, again, it's very long-winded. These monistic idealism videos, there was a part 1 that is sort of, I think, 3 hours long. This is more than 4 hours long. So it's a total of 7 hours of rambling, more or less, right? There's some nuggets here and there, and that's why I'm jumping onto this one, because there's particular reference to something that is in direct, sorry for the dinging, it's my email app. I installed a new email system in my computer, email. I'm trying to get out of Google, Gmail. Where was I? Yes, there's a few thoughts before I get to the major stuff. First of all, I have sort of solidified or clarified my critique points in a presentation over here to the left, as you can see, and then we'll dig into the video in a bit. But first of all, the point, or as you can see, there's a very meticulous timestamp list here, right? It's when we get to 1:26:34, there's Nathan Hawkins' objections to analytic idealism. That's exactly the video from that guy called Absolute Philosophy that I also used as a stepstone in my video series, the 4-part series, recently. And it deals with the actual, one of the problems that he points to, that I also point to in my critique points, right? So that's what I want to get into. Now, as you might remember in the video that Nathan Hawkins did, that I used in my video, that he said that he tried to contact Bernardo Kastrup in order to have a, philosophical discourse. Now, I'm just trying to understand this, right? Bernardo Kastrup supposedly has a PhD, at least one PhD in philosophy, he has another PhD in science, right? And this guy, Nathan Hawkins, has a PhD in philosophy. So they're both in the club, in the big club that you and I are not a part of. We're the peasants who are paying for it, right? But apparently he didn't want to discuss this particular end of philosophy with him. He said, no, thank you, politely, supposedly, right? But then he can spend with these guys on monistic idealism. I have nothing against these people. I don't want to debate them because they're Christians, right? Monistic idealism, I contacted him once and he said, yes, I'm a Christian, when I asked. And then I said, okay, then I'm not going to discuss you, because then you're driven by an agenda, right? So, but I have nothing, I appreciate that they're doing what they're doing, right? 8 hours Bernardo Kastrup is good enough for me, right? But then why can he spend 7 or 8 hours with these two dudes who are not sort of a member of the club? But he can't spend, an hour with that guy and Nathan Hawkins, who should actually be someone who is good at, pinpointing various problems here and there, right? It sort of coalesces into an idea here that he wants to preach to the choir. He doesn't want any scrutiny on his. I have to plug in my power supply here, or power cable. He doesn't want any scrutiny, right? He wants to just preach to the choir. He wants somebody who's, oh my God, Sir Kastrup has arrived. Everybody in the congregation, get down on your knees and pray to the God, right? I'm hyperbolic, right? But still, it feels like, no, I don't want to discuss my, right? And there's also a bit later in this particular interview, he says something about, and I don't know if I will get there, right? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But he says something to the effect of, well, my philosophy is probably wrong, right? It's almost certain that there's somebody in some unspecified number of years is going to find out that is deeply flawed, right? But at least I'm trying. I mean, I'm like, what are we doing here? Are you not confident that your argument, is it because there's so much criticism floating around everywhere now about this analytic idealism? You have to downgrade the significance of what you're doing to, it might be right, it might be wrong, who cares? Maybe someone will find out in 20 years, right, when I'm dead, right? But at the same time, his next book is something like, my philosophy is perfect, and it will revolutionize the 21st century, right? I'm paraphrasing, but, it's not far off, right? So, let me recapture my critique points, right? And I have organized them in a structure. I really, 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 really like structure in my thinking, as you might, which might come across to you, right? First, you start out with a reduction base. What is that which you are using as a foundation for your thinking, right? That foundation should then be used to create an ontology. And by that means the reduction base is that stepping stone for describing the next part of your ontology. You could say potentially that all of your reduction base is also the ontology. But then there are no categories. There are no interdependencies, right? Then a color is the same as a sound, is the same as a taste, is the same as an elephant. That doesn't work for me, right? My sense of smell of a flower is not of the same category as an elephant, or the idea of the moon. You can't lump them into one bag here, right? At least not in my opinion. Therefore, it has to be categorized into categories. And if there's some interdependency, do you need a color in order to have elephant, for instance, right? Then there might be an interdependency. That's what you're describing in your ontology, in my opinion. But in order to do that rigidly, you need to reduce down to which is the starting point within your ontology. If there's interdependencies, there must be something that is the starting point, right? In my opinion, that's how my ontology works. So I'm, of course, criticizing from my standpoint, from my philosophy, but what else could I do, right? There is no objective standard, glorified, struck in marble kind of, this is the reference philosophy everybody is working from. No, everybody's sitting in their little trench somewhere, right? Fighting for their own little pet philosophy. As I'm doing, you could say, right? I don't want to fight, I just want to argue, right? I don't want to defend my philosophy. I'm not trying to defend my philosophy. If you find flaws in it, please let me know, right? Please, give it to me, right? Okay, so in the reduction base, there's actually no reduction to find the base. He's referring to reduction and a reduction base, but he's actually not doing a reduction, right? And then his PhD defense appears to cherry picking instead, right? And then he also talks about a dashboard, which sounds like a base, but it isn't. It's a metaphor. A metaphor is something that is derived from something else. Then that dashboard cannot then be, right? Dashboard is just saying all phenomena, basically. And then he calls it a dashboard, right? So it's like stepping away from phenomena immediately into an abstraction called dashboard. And dashboard is a very big problem also, and maybe I should mention that, because dashboard appeals implicitly through semantics that there's something beyond it, just like in an airline cockpit, right? Airplane cockpit. But a dashboard cannot be a base because it's a metaphor. And he has said that explicitly, it's a metaphor. And then it's incredible that he can, at the same time, somehow appear to it being a reduction base, right? As far as I understand it. Okay, so when we're actually dealing with doing the ontology, clarifying and classifying and categorizing and finding interdependencies within the phenomena, he sort of confuses metaphysics with the ontology. He thinks that ontology is sort of metaphysics. He's stepping out of his dashboard to talk about what is beyond the dashboard. That's not an ontology. Ontology is how to classify all the things on the so-called dashboard, right? So there's actually no ontology presented. In my opinion, there is no ontology. He just calls it dashboard and said, done, right? While I'm very interested in how the fuck that dashboard is supposed to be understood, right? Content of dashboard not described, so not in his ontology, exactly, right? So maybe these two are actually the same point in 2 and 3 in the ontology. Okay, external world. He has no argument for an external world other than it's given, right? He takes an external world for granted. Now, maybe that sounds like it's the same, but it's not, right? So I'm taking that maybe other than given, right? He has no argument. It's not the same as taking it for granted, right? He has no argument, therefore he has to take it for granted, maybe I could say, right? But there's two built-in problems in it. There is no argument and then taking things for granted. It doesn't follow just because you're not arguing that you can just take things for granted, right? External must be imagined. Because if it's external to your experience, you only have imagination, but an imagination is in itself an abstraction from your ontology. So it's within, if it's an imagination you have access to and it's imagined, it must be a part of your ontology then, right? Then it's not in the external world. So he is imagining something as a placeholder for something beyond his imagination, right? That's an abstraction upon an abstraction, so to say. That's wild, right? Okay. So, metaphysics. Why metaphysics? It's circular and useless, and I refer back to my earlier video on this, right? No argument for why only mind. He is avoiding dualism, right? There is no argument other than, well, then I avoid dualism. Mind can only be understood as a synthetic abstraction. Yes, because you can experience mind. Mind is some abstraction you have gotten used to thinking of as being something where the sort of the phenomena is floating around in, which I see a lot in presentations of idealism and analytic idealism. There's this sphere called mind, and then there's sort of phenomena in there, as if they're sort of suspended in mind or something like that. And then they say, oh, therefore it's all made of mind. It's like saying if you have a bag of groceries, right? It's all made of grocery bag. What is in there, right? It's stupid. If mind is everything, there was no reduction, right? Yeah, problem. This one should actually maybe be moved up a bit, right? Maybe I should. Maybe I should do another one for if there's a part 2. I need to scrutinize this, right? If mind is everything, there was no reduction. But the problem I'm talking about, maybe it is good to have it here, because if he says mind is everything, he is tearing down any limitations of what he can do, because he can always, he's just lumping ontology and metaphysics together and say it's not mind, and now I can go and do whatever I want, right? He's basically taking himself out of a direct experience because he doesn't care about bicycles and tomatoes, right? He cares about his big mind daddy. So the reduction, as I should put this up here in reduction base. So sorry about that, right? I need to look at this once more. I'm a bit fast on the trigger, maybe. If you reduce, you can't reduce it to everything, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too, basically. So that's it. He cannot argue further if everything is mind. Exactly. He implies it's a God. Yeah, he's implied as God. Why all of a sudden bring the idea of God into it? It's a huge cultural baggage, right? You say, yeah, if you want to call it God, you can call it God, and you're a spy for God and all this, right? I'm like, okay, bringing out the garlic and whatever, right? It's I mean, do you really need to bring God into this, right? And it seems like a very when you take a detour, so very convoluted and very strange, and you forget what you're actually doing while you're doing this detour, and then you sort of all of a sudden say God, and that was the actual purpose of it. It was to get to God. All the other shit is just, taking advantage of the idea of rigid philosophy in order to validate your need for a God. Right? I don't like that at all, right? I don't want to piss on people who live in their religious beliefs, as long as they don't inflict it on their poor little children, right? Go have your little religion, right? But don't misuse philosophy to get to the idea of God, right? This is sort of cultural baggage that goes all the way back to, Neoplatonism and, when Christianity needed some philosophy and Aristotle and, bring it together so, nobody can criticize because we are also Aristotelian, we are also Platonists and fuck off, right? And then there's the appeal to parsimony, which is not an argument, right? Everybody should understand that. Appeal to science, right? He appeals to DID, dissociative identity disorder, and then he appeals to evolution, and he appeals to the second law of thermodynamics. These are all interpretations of that dashboard of his, right? He cannot use that to establish the ontology of that dashboard, or even any kind of metaphysics of an external world, right? It's so circular, it's unbelievable that he doesn't see that. I don't get it, right? How he can overlook this. Okay, then I would sort of say, okay, after all this metaphysics, why metaphysics in first place is circular or useless, right? How about epistemology, right? How about getting to a definition of knowledge? And maybe objectivity, right? What about science or the philosophy of science? How do you get from your ontology to science? Right? He has already gotten there because he's using it in order to solidify his ontology, which is that circular question, right? So therefore it's sort of given. It's just, it's a tool I can use whenever I want it. If I want some science, I'm going to grab some science, right? And finally, what about ethics, right? To get to a moral principle, which is the crowning achievement of all of your philosophy, in my opinion. Where is it? You could set up, okay, screw science, right? I would be fine with that. But don't screw epistemology and ethics, right? All of this you have done here, right? I would say metaphysics is completely useless because it's pure abstraction, right? It's useless. As I've said, why metaphysics? It's either circular or useless, right? But an external world is not a futile endeavor, but you have to be careful how you approach it, right? But reduction-based ontology and external world, and then he stops there because now he's got his metaphysics and his mind daddy and God, and that's it. That's where he wants to go. He sort of sidetracks himself. Metaphysics is sort of a sidetracking, and if you jump into metaphysics, you never come back, right? But how about epistemology and ethics, right? How about that, Mr. PhD, right? If you stay with this metaphysics, it's like you're creating motors for a car. I used this analogy before, right? You're inventing and producing motors for cars, but you're really interested in what is really behind the motor I have created. I'm not interested in the rest of the car. I've created this motor, and I'm going to imagine what is beyond the motor, because that's what all car lovers, they love this thinking, right? No, They want a motor, but they also want a car with wheels and some interior and some seats and whatever, room for the baggage and windows and so on, right? Steering wheel and yes, and how to drive the fucking car, right? How to drive the car is ethics and a moral principle. But no, I am not into that. Oh, no, I'm going to think what is behind the motor. Yes, and I think there are ripples behind the motor. That's how I see this. It's completely futile. Who the hell is going to take any of this seriously? In the 21st century, where we have to face reality, right? Oh, let's step into Middle Earth and talk about elephants instead, right? Yes. Okay. Let's get back to monistic idealism. And let's head off with Nathan Hawkins' objections to analytic idealism.
Here. So there's a couple of idealists I've been noticing. I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Dr. Nathan Hawkins. He's an idealist. There's other people I know, like pessimistic idealism, and even myself have brought up this point, how there's sort of this in-house debate that's going on in idealism, where there's representationalism.
Oh, in-house debate, yes. There's none of those who are not idealists who are allowed into this discussion, like me, right? I don't support any kind of ism, so I'm kind of independent as far as I can possibly be, right? No, it's just an in-house. We're just tweaking the knobs a bit. Yes, we have to align, we have to beat those who don't understand the correct idealism into submission. It's an in-house problem. It's a civil war within idealism, right? It's sort of, why? Well, why is it in-house? What the hell, man, right? Is it a club? Is it collectivism? You have to, das Kapital, right? You have to follow the mantras.
Or indirect realism. But then there's also direct realism. Those who think we really do see reality the way it really is, and those like yourself and maybe Hoffman who think, no, we really don't. And Hawkins came out with a video very recently. It's getting quite a bit of views. And he's making a point similar to those like myself and other people about this. And I've already asked you about this in the past, but since he just made this video, I thought I'd just bring it up. So he thinks that there's this self-defeating nature going on when it comes to trying to use scientific studies, like trying to talk about evolution, to argue that we don't really see the way the world really is because we rely on our perceptions, observations to know about evolution. But if we're not really seeing the way the world really is, then why would we think evolution is real and actually shapes our senses? Kind of a long-winded question, but hopefully you get the spirit of the question. So what would be your response to that?
There is something to this argument. It's not a new argument. It was made years.
Okay, so now we're taking a detour, right? We're trying to, let me put out some fluff here so to cover up that I'm violating this problem that I pointed to here, right? Appeal to science is invalid in ontology for obvious reasons, right? Think of it this way, right? It is a representation of how seemingly Bernardo Kastrup thinks, right? If you have the dashboard, it's the same as, in a way, sitting in a cinema, and you're looking at that screen, and you expect to somehow derive from that screen how all the things that are responsible for what is on the screen by looking at the screen, right? You try to say, I can explain how the screen works by looking at what is on the screen. How could you possibly do that? Because you need to understand how it works, that which is behind the screen, in order to have that which is on the screen. Then you can look at the screen and say, now I can derive somehow how the screen works and why it's there. That's the circularity of it, right? That's why science is as he himself says, it's trying to predict how things move about and observing how it moves about, how it has moved about, and based on that, how it's possibly going to be configured in the future. But that's describing the screen and what goes on the screen, right? It's not describing why it's on the screen, right? You can never look at the screen. You can never look at, George Clooney on the screen and say, aha, that's why there is a movie, right? It's stupid, right? It is really, really, really stupid. And it's just one of a smorgasbord of problems, right? That's why he doesn't like somebody who can actually scrutinize things like I'm doing here, and potentially Mr. Hawkins also could be possibly, though I'm not, too impressed about his ability to argue, but he does point out some very valid criticism that I have similarly pointed out in my list here. That's why he wants to go to two Christian boys like monistic idealism and his friend and sit and, ramble on for 8 hours rather than go and do some actual philosophy with somebody like Mr. Hawkins, right? It just goes to show that he's not confident in what he's doing. If somebody wanted me to come along and explain my philosophy in a show, I will be happy to do so. If you know anybody, if you want me to come on your show, let me know. I'm actually a very nice dude, right? Even though I might come across as, loudmouth in these kinds of deconstructions. But this Bernardo Kastrup guy, he really gets my piss boiling, right? Because of his apparent neglect of good, rigid criticism. And while at the same time he thinks he's basically God's gift to humanity, right? That kind of megalomania, that pisses me off, right? So let's get back into the video here, right? Let him
ago first by Plantinga, I think was his name, who argued that.
Yeah. I don't care what other people argue, right? Don't bring somebody else in. That was somebody 80 years ago who argued. No. Your argument. You are doing a circularity, right? You're saying, when it comes to, for instance, evolution, I have looked at the screen and I have interpreted this. I had some evidence there and there was this thing there. Maybe back in time until now, things have changed this way or the other, based on some kind of, structure within biology, genetics and DNA and so on, right? That gives you the idea of evolution, but that's an interpretation of the screen, mate. That's not an explanation of the screen. I have personally been very sort of doubtful about using evolution in any kind of, and you can go back in my videos several years, many years in fact, maybe 4, 5, 6 years, where I sort of, there might be something about this evolution, but I don't think it's a good argument and so on. At this point I'm saying you can't use evolution. You can use evolution after you have established your ontology and knowledge and so on. Fine. I'm not trying to invalidate the idea of evolution. I am invalidating the idea of using evolution to clarify that's which you're using to get to the conclusion of evolution, right? At some point, you can't go backwards, right? It's sort of a point of no return mentality of rigidity in your philosophy. At some point, you can do science and, for instance, get to evolution, but all the philosophy before that point cannot be established by something that comes after that point. When you had established knowledge and the idea of a philosophy of science, you can do science to get to evolution at the front end of that, right? But the back end of that is another kind of philosophy where you can't use that which is after that point to clarify that which is before that point. That's circularity, and that's what he appeals to by using evolution to describe why things are the way they are.
That evolution was self-defeating because of that. Because if you trust evolution,
yes, it's in a metaphysical sense, right? Let's say external world. If you're getting to an idea of evolution, then evolution is a description of the dashboard. To stay with the dashboard metaphor, right? So you can only say my dashboard behaved this way, which I have come up with the idea of evolution, right? But you can extract that evolution to be a part of an external world just like that, without at least saying, okay, I'm going to use an axiom. I'm saying that external world works from the exact same principle as I've come up with based on my dashboard, right? That's the jump he makes without clarifying it. He says, therefore, there's also evolution out there. Who says this? Just because there's evolution of your dashboard doesn't necessarily follow there's evolution beyond your dashboard, right? There may be something going on there. Who the hell knows? That somehow is manifested as what you call evolution from that abstraction from your dashboard. But that doesn't mean that evolution beyond your dashboard that manifests as evolution or manifests as something on your dashboard that you abstract or identify as evolution, right? It's a bit of a leap to say just because I came up with the idea of evolution, there must be evolution out there, right? So that's the criticism, and it's a very, very valid criticism, in my opinion.
then perception is not revealing the truth, but you base your theory of evolution on perception. So it's self-defeating that way. Plantinga was his name. He was the first one to come up with this argument, I think 20 years ago even. So this isn't new, whatever Nathan is saying.
No, but the point is not that. That's why it's so futile, this idea of what is beyond. Because at the end of the day, you need to be there and experience using your dashboard what you expect to be there. So if you expect to be there something, then you're using your dashboard system, your science, to predict what you expect to be on the dashboard. You don't care what is beyond your dashboard because you only have your dashboard to get around with. So you're interested in predicting what the dashboard is going to show. That's why you like evolution. There's no problem in that. But there's a problem in saying, okay, now I have evolution. Now I'm going to go before the idea of evolution to explain how I get to that which I'm using to get to evolution. It's about where are we in our structure of philosophy. If you're ahead of the idea of evolution in the structure of your philosophy, no problem. Just don't claim that you're predicting what is going on beyond your dashboard. Evolution tells you about the dashboard, right? And it tells you about what, when you have the idea of knowledge, I would say, before you, and science actually, right? Before you go and do evolution, or come to the conclusion of evolution. You can't use that conclusion to then step back before the point where you settle on knowledge and science to explain how you get to knowledge and science. How can you not see this, mate, right?
Is maybe recycled. I don't know him, by the way. I heard the name, but I don't know him. So I think there is something to it, but I don't think that there is nothing to represent to the argument of evolution for representationalism on the account of that. In other words, I think we can still create coherent theories about what's going on, even though our access to what is going on is intermediated by representation, and representation is not a transparent window into the world. It's sort of a dashboard representation of the world. Why? Well, let's stick to the metaphor of the airplane's dashboard. Even if the pilot is flying only by instruments and does not have a transparent windshield, the states of the dashboard will dynamically correlate with the states of the sky in such a manner that you can still coherently theorize about the dynamics of the sky.
That sounded
there will
like
be
something really
correlation.
crazy. I have to hear that again.
The airplane's dashboard, even if the pilot is flying only by instruments and does not have a transparent windshield, the states of the dashboard will dynamically correlate with the states of the sky in such a manner that you can still coherently theorize about the dynamics of the sky.
Okay, so now sky has become something, a representation of the outside. How do you do that? The sky is also on the dashboard. Everything is the dashboard that you have access to. You can't take some part of your dashboard and say, that is outside my dashboard. That is the paradox of materialism. And how do you know that whatever is going on that dashboard of yours, right, to stay with the metaphor, is dynamically correlatable? What's the term? How do you know that? How do you get to that? You need to understand what is beyond the dashboard in order to see that it's dynamically correlating. How the hell do you do that, Mr. Mind God, right? How do you do that? Just because there are regularities doesn't mean that there must be some correlation to some external world you don't have access to. How do you do this? This is, it's like, I can't believe how stupid this is, right? And he says sky, as if it's something that is outside. Yes, in the metaphor of the airplane, there is a sky out there, because that's a metaphor for something that is normally all of my dashboard if I'm sitting in an actual airplane cockpit. But in this metaphor, in ontology and metaphysics, there is no outside that is given to you. And using the term of dashboard doesn't mean all of a sudden you have invented an outside. Just by using semantics of the term dashboard to imply an external world, that is sophistry, right? There is no access to an external world. That's why you're trying to establish it. If there was access to an external world somehow, why would you need to write 10 books about it, right? Because everybody would be completely on board with it. You're not writing 10 books about elephants and tomatoes, right? Because everybody has access to them, right? So how do you get to this correlation? It's because you have taken some of your abstractions already, placed them beyond your dashboard and saying they are responsible. And there are correlations because I have this mind of mine that is in touch with God of mindness, right? It's completely stupid.
There will be correlations between the behavior of different diodes on your dashboard that will still allow you to coherently theorize.
You theorize? Why do I need to theorize coherently? One thing is that you have a dashboard that shows these dials, which is another way of saying their colors and sounds and elephant, tomatoes, right? But theorizing about tomatoes and elephant is an abstraction on the inside of the cockpit. That cannot possibly be something that is outside, right? If you're sitting there in your cockpit and theorizing about the elephants and the tomatoes and the colors, that theory is a part of that cockpit then. Otherwise, where the hell is it then? How can you refer to it? It popped out of nowhere or what, right? It's incredible, right?
About the dynamics of the external world. Now, you have to take that theorizing with a grain of salt. I grant that. But I do not grant that because all we have is the dashboard and no transparent window to see the world as it actually.
You do not grant? Who the hell do you think you are, man? I have touched the finger of Fred Matza. He's the God, right? I am the mind. and we have a creation story, and we are going to hand this to you, and you have to pay attention to that, and we are telling you, we are handing you what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, right?
Actually is. But because of that, then all theorizing is hopeless. No, I think that goes too far. Because representations, although...
Yeah, just make sure that what you're doing is actually not against your own thinking, right? That you're not jumping on either side of this borderline between the inside and outside of this particular experience of yours, right? It seems like these lines have been blurred, and that's why you're talking of mind everywhere, because that blurs every line anyway, right? There's just these magical dissociations, which is the circular argument to appeal to science. That is explaining why you are not a solipsist, right?
They don't show you the world as it is. They are supposed to convey accurate and actionable information about the world. Otherwise, they would...
They are supposed to. Where did you get that? Where did you write? Where did you hear about that? Who told you? It's supposed to. Yes, I met some guy down in Amsterdam, in the red light district, and I had a couple of reefers and a hooker, and told me that you're supposed to have this, right? How does this philosophy work? You're supposed to? What kind of argument is that, right? Is that the mind daddy who's told you you're supposed to have this? Right? What kind of mysticism is this?
Wouldn't have been useful to survival. And the argument is precisely that they are useful to survival. If you close your eyes and...
But the survival is an abstraction. It's an idea. You're not experiencing survival, right? On your dashboard, there's not, oh my God, there's a survival there. There could be colors and sounds and maybe an elephant as a cognition, but there's no survival there, right? It's not, look, that survival, it's blue, right? And it's sort of oval in shape and smells like flowers, right? There's no survival there. It's an abstraction, it's an idea, it's an interpretation. Then it must be a part of that cockpit you're sitting in, right? Otherwise you wouldn't have it. So, and that's the violation he does. All of a sudden, all that he can come up with, science and imagination, abstractions, he can put it wherever he wants. He can put it out there because somebody apparently says he's allowed to without disclosing who the hell told him he's allowed to do this, right? And there are correlations between an outside and an inside, of course. It's like, where the hell did you get this, man, right? Did you argue for this in a rigid fashion? Or is it just handed to you by your mind daddy or what?
in your years and you go for a stride in the city, for a stroll in the city, chances are you'll be run over by a car. You don't want that. It's very useful to have your eyes open and your ears as well. So although perception is a dashboard, not a transparent window, it does coherent.
But that's when you have the idea of knowledge, and that's why it makes sense to make the idea of a car knowledge, because that's what might run over you, right? But that you had the idea of this doesn't mean you can use that to explain why there are cars and why you can take a stroll in the city, right? It's not like, it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but you can't say just because they're a baby there must be bathwater, right? And therefore, if you can't have that, there were no babies and there are no bathwater. No. Hang on, dude, right? It's just the structure of your philosophy is unrigid and incoherent. It's all over the place, right? That's why you seem to think that you can just grab what you want in that situation, wherever you are in your argumentative structure that is sort of weird, right? That you go, oh, now I'm going to take some science. Oh, now I'm going to say some boo-boo shit. Now I'm going to say God. Now I'm going to say, walk a stroll in the park, right? It's sort of all over the place, man, right? He's just rambling. That's, at this point, all I'm hearing is just somebody rambling his craziness. onto the world, right? There is no rigidity. There's no rigidity. I would like to see him do. He can take my, my menu over here on the left, right? Show me your reduction. How are you doing reduction? Are you just cherry picking mind because you want mind, or what? What makes you cherry pick? What is the meta philosophy or philosophy behind cherry picking? And if it's mind, you're cherry picking. What principle are you following? How did you get to that principle of cherry picking a base, right? When you say dashboard, what are you actually referring to? Is it colors? Is it cognitions? What are you referring to when you talk about dashboard? Because you always stay with the dashboard metaphor. A metaphor cannot possibly be a base for anything, because a dashboard is an abstraction from something else, right? Okay, give me your ontology. How is it structured? How are all these things combined and placed? And are there holes in the structure? Is it complete or whatever, right? How did you get to the external world? Give me the argument, right? And why do we need to do this metaphysics? And why are you staying there? Why are you not saying, okay, now I've done the metaphysics. Let me get some epistemology and science and ethics to get some old fucking principle, right? Why is it not structured? Why are you just sitting there rambling?
Correlate with the states of the world in a way that allows for fruitful theorizing. I think to deny that would be to deny.
Fruitful theorizing, yeah, because that's what he wants. He wants to sit there in his attic and he wants to sit and type very fancy words and sentences and theorizing, yes, because that's the major problem now, right? What he's actually doing, and listen carefully, right? As I said this only once. I shall say this only once. He is not doing philosophy. He's actually doing science. If he says he's theorizing, you are not doing philosophy. Philosophy is not theorizing. Theorizing is purely in the area of science. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. He thinks and he can combine his very scientific mind with some kind of philosophy and put it together. No, they are dissociated, right? To stay in the lingo. Science is dependent on philosophy. You cannot theorize about philosophy, right? A theory is what you're doing when you're doing science. Okay? So he is basically taking a big fucking dump on philosophy because he doesn't know what he's doing. He thinks he can come up with a theory and then he can throw words at it in order to prove it, while at the same time he's going to tell you it's probably wrong, right? Why the hell would I care about metaphysics that is circular or useless? That could also be possibly very likely to be wrong. Why would I spend my hard-earned life on that, right? Theories are not philosophy. When you're doing philosophy, you're trying to clarify what you have access to, right? You're combining thinking about what there is and how you approach it. If you're presenting it, you're correlating it with words. Right? You have your thinking over here, and then you have the words over here. And there are direct correlation from term to thinking, like color, like sound, like taste, right? These are particular direct one-to-one representation of a particular kind of phenomena, right? I don't have a theory about red. I don't have a theory about elephants or tomatoes, right? That's a part of my ontology. When I'm theorizing, I am theorizing about scientific aspects of how the workings of that dashboard. That's theorizing. That means you cannot theorize about something that is beyond the dashboard, because you need the dashboard in order to do science. And theorizing is about science. How do I explain this in a way that it maybe it's because of at least 100 years of fucked up government financed philosophy, where it has been more important to obscurify things and make it cumbersome and create infinite number of isms about this, that, and the other, and sub-isms and sub-isms, that philosophy is so confused at this point that nobody can actually handle it. And then some guy like this comes along and think, I have combined science and God and mind at large and everything into one thing, and it's the best philosophy for the next 100 years, right? Ugh.
Deny the effectiveness of science, because all science is mediated by perception.
Exactly! He said it! If he means perception as the dashboard, right? Science is mediated by perception. It's mediated by you're looking at the dashboard, you're theorizing about the dashboard. Then you cannot fucking theorize about something that is beyond the dashboard, right? Which is in itself imaginary. You are imagining there might be something beyond the dashboard. You are imagining these correlations, right? There's no theorizing there. It's all imaginary, right? And if it's imaginary and you have an idea what might be going on there, okay, but you still have to do science about the dashboard at the end of the day. It's still elephants and tomatoes and whatever, right? It doesn't matter if it's ripples or it's Lego out there, right?
And it is also to deny the very spirit of representation. The spirit of representation is that although it doesn't show you the world as it is, it will show
what world? The world? The world. Now you're appealing to having some insight to a world that is different than the one you're experiencing. How do you get to that? It's like it's given. You have already been there and come back and say, yeah, there's something out there, but it's different. Huh? How do you do that, man? Right? Is it only me who can see how crazy this is?
Show you the world in a manner that is most optimal for you to traffic in the world. In other words, it's telling you relevant things.
But you are trafficking in your dashboard world. You are not trafficking. Though if there is an external world, your body, so to say, might be out there, but you're still using that dashboard, virtual reality, so to say, right? That's what is important, because that's what you're using on a daily basis. You don't have anything else. Basically, even if you can imagine some external world, you have no access to it, and you can't use it, right? You can't change your understanding of your, as I said, the circularity of metaphysics, right? Is that if you say that it doesn't change anything, why would I want to do it, right? If I say I have a dashboard, I think there's something beyond the dashboard. I came up with a metaphysics that doesn't change what's going on my dashboard. Why would I care about that metaphysics? Now, the point is, if you say that metaphysics changes your understanding of your dashboard, then you are violating that foundation you used to start doing the metaphysics. So you're going into an infinite regress circular argument, right? Where you change that idea of that dashboard. Okay, so now you have to make a new, because you changed the foundation, you have to make a new metaphysics. That might change that dashboard and so on and so on and so on and so on and so on, right? So metaphysics is futile in any case.
About the structure and dynamics of the world. They are not the same structure and dynamics as the representation, but the representation is telling you things that do correlate with the structure and dynamics of the world.
How do you know? How do you get to that? How the hell do you get to that? It correlates. How do you get to that? Just because there are regularities in your dashboard doesn't mean that it correlates with something outside your dashboard. It's a complete... It's such a huge jump that you're not clarifying how you get to. I'm not saying you can't get to it, but you need to fucking present an argument for how you get to it, right? Otherwise, I'm just going to call you fucking crazy, right?
Can coherently and fruitfully theorize through the
Fruitfully, well, what the stupid argument, right? Oh, you can theorize fruitfully because I need it, because that's my everyday. So I'm just going to say fruitful theorizing is possible, right? Because mind daddy.
intermediation of the representations.
How do you know their representation? How do you get to an understanding of that external world before you start to do metaphysics in order to get to that external world, or get to that external world without an argument, and then fabulate about the contents in some kind of ontological endeavor beyond your dashboard, right?
I definitely appreciate you commenting on that, Bernardo. This is idealists. We all are on the same team. We're all idealists. But I know that this is a topic. It's like an in-house debate.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's just an in-house debate. Don't people who are not idealists, you are not allowed to criticize. You know, we are just discussing on the parent table. You over there on the kid table, you shut the fuck up and drink your sodas, right?
Between the idealists, and it's a friendly, constructive debate, and I really like hearing you add to that. So,
add to that? Man, don't you understand the criticism, man, right? Don't you see that it's circular? You don't care because you need it. Yeah, it gets me where I want to go because I need to go to God, right? So I don't care if it's a stupid argument, as long as it sounds plausible and people are going to believe it because I need it, right? I don't want to tell mommy she's crazy and she filled me with bullshit to control me. No, I want to find some excuse, and Bernardo Kastrup fits the bill perfectly because apparently he can fit everything together and get to God. That's what I need, yes!
This next section we're going to get into here, it's about the fallibility of our minds.
Maybe that's maybe a possible part 2. Let's see how far it goes, right? I am not satisfied with that answer. That was a politician answer to a very, very coherent criticism of his metaphysics, which is based on circular arguments of science, appeals to science. He just say, yeah, but I think I like the correlations, and it's out there and it's in there, and I like to make theorizing, it's fruitful, so therefore I like it and it's good, and therefore I've answered the question. Fuck you, man, right? Okay, have a nice day. See you in the next one.